So, here we have another classic example of, well, Brexiteers basically denying reality. In their fantasy world, leaving the EU with no deal is perfectly fine. It's perfectly acceptable. Nothing bad could possibly happen under this scenario. Yet, oh dear. So, this comes from The Guardian. So, Brexiteers have hit back at leaked Whitehall advice. Remember, this is just advice. So this is Whitehall, civil servants basically saying, this is what could happen under these different scenarios. And there were 3 different ones that they said could possibly happen. So, Brexiteers have hit back at leaked Whitehall advice, warning of food and fuel shortages if Britain leaves the EU without a deal, with Conservative backbencher Jacob Rees-Mogg calling it Project Fear on speed. So, as Theresa May's ministers prepare to return to Westminster after the White Sun recess, the Cabinet is still in deadlock over the customs arrangements, and a fresh row broke over the risks of a no-deal Brexit. 3 scenarios were drawn up in Whitehall and obtained by the Sunday Times. The worst of these 3 was referred to as Armageddon, and they set out the consequences should Britain walk away from the negotiating table, which is what a lot of these Brexiteers have been saying since day one. Oh, we should have just walked away, there wouldn't be any consequences, we'd be fine. And yet, here you have Whitehall basically saying, yeah, if we did that, it'd be Armageddon would happen. It'd be the worst case scenario. I keep on telling you, these people just live in a fantasy world. So, in the second scenario, not even the worst, the port of Dover will collapse. On day 1, the supermarkets of Cornwall and Scotland will run out of food within a couple of days, and hospitals will run out of medicine within 2 weeks. So that's just the second scenario. That's not even the worst scenario. That's just the second scenario. So a spokesman for the Department of Exiting the European Union dismissed the reports. Oh, thank you guys. The people who are meant to be trying to sort this out, dismissing a report. You think this might be useful for maybe planning something in case this happens, but apparently not. That's just unfortunately where we are. So, they dismissed these as completely false. A significant amount of work and decision making has already gone into our no-deal plans. And yet here you have Whitehall, another department in there, basically going, your plans aren't good enough. That's literally what this other department has said. I think this is the Department for Transport. And considering it's the Department for Transport, I think they would know a damn sight more about logistics and things these guys have said, which is what it's based on. So, Rees-Mogg, the chair of the European Research Group, a backbench pro-Brexit group, has insisted nothing could prevent Britain from importing whatever goods it needed, except in limited fields such as arms sales. An exporting nation, in the absence of sanctions, has no legal mechanism to obstruct trade. They're not talking about obstructing trade. What the argument has constantly been, and what these Brexiteers constantly say, is we want these amazing free trade deals because they will remove all these barriers to trade, and yet they deny completely the reality that the single market and the customs union give complete frictionless borders. They remove pretty much all barriers to trade there could be, and yet leaving these institutions and organisations will result in barriers to trade. You know, it's a complete it's complete nonsense the way they talk about it. But yeah. So, but other Brexiteers have acknowledged the risks of leaving without a deal and have blamed the lack of preparation on the highest levels of government. So a senior government source said the negotiating team hasn't bothered preparing to implement its policy of leaving the single market / customs union, and now businesses and MPs are finally waking up to the consequences. There must now be an urgent change of mentality by the Treasury, the Cabinet and Number 10 to prepare to be a third country if we are to stop the UK drifting into being an EU colony. Another senior Tory insider said, "This is what you get if you have a group of Remain-leaning people running stuff." That's so funny. That's just so funny. That's just blaming. This whole narrative they're trying to build of if Brexit goes wrong. Oh, it's not our fault. It's the Remainers that did this. Remember, I've said this from day one. People like Jacob Rees-Mogg could literally kick Theresa May's stool completely over and topple her. Just like that. They could do it. They could do it literally tomorrow. And they'd be in power. But they don't want to be, because they know that Brexit will be a disaster, and they don't want to be blamed for that disaster. They are now making contingency plans so that when Brexit is a disaster, they can come in and sweep up, say, "Oh, you did it completely wrong. If only you'd done it like this, and if now we're in power, we'll do it like this." And come on, guys. This is just backseat driving at its most blatant, or backseat Brexiting, as we like to call it here. So the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, told MPs last October he was reluctant to spend taxpayers' money on preparing for a no-deal Brexit unless absolutely necessary. "I don't believe we should be in the business of making perpetually negatory expenditure until the very last moment we need to do so," he said. The leaked no-deal scenario suggested that the whole case officials would have to charter planes to airlift medical supplies into the country, and within a fortnight petrol would also be in short supply. The government has suggested it would temporarily waive tariffs and border checks on goods entering Britain in the event of a no-deal scenario, in an effort to minimise disruption at borders. But the EU could still halt the flow of goods in the opposite direction. And it wouldn't be a halt. It would basically be doing, hey, you're now a third country. You're no longer a member of the EU. You're not in the customs union. You're not in the single market. This is what it actually means. But these idiot Brexiteers live in absolute fantasy land where somehow not trading with your closest trading partner and erecting barriers to trade is somehow a good idea. So meanwhile, the EU agreements on everything from medicine regulation to aviation govern key aspects of everyday life, and this has not yet been agreed. However, Britain could continue to benefit from them as a third country. The papers appear to have been drawn up for the Inter-Ministerial Group on Preparedness, which is meant to coordinate the government's Brexit plans. So, here you have the Department from EU exiting the EU saying that these are complete lies, yet they would have had an absolute hand in preparing these papers. This is what I keep on saying this, but this is what these Brexiteers are. They're living in cloud cuckoo land, where somehow as leaving these things and not gaining any benefits of the EU that we have now is somehow a good idea. It was never a good idea. And the more and more every day it becomes clearer. So, early in negotiations, May and her senior ministers repeatedly claimed that no deal is better than a bad deal. But they have become increasingly alarmed about the risks of crashing out without a trade and regulatory agreement in place. However, the Cabinet are still unable to agree a collective position on what customs arrangements Britain should seek after Brexit. And hardline Brexiteers on the Conservative backbenches are increasingly becoming bellicose on this. An editorial in the Sun newspaper at the weekend claimed that a whiff of panic was emanating from Downing Street and said that if May could not lead us fully out of the EU with no deal if necessary, she must make way for someone who can. May set up 2 working groups to refine 2 rival customs plans and report back to her Brexit in her cabinet. But more than 3 weeks later, the Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, has acknowledged that his group, which is looking at the Prime Minister's preferred customs partnership model, has only met once. Well, May must meet her fellow EU leaders at the end of June, and there is a continued disquiet among members of the bloc about the government's lack of progress on setting out its solution to the problem of avoiding a hard border in Ireland. Remember, this isn't the EU's responsibility to sort out. We're the ones who chose to leave. And the EU have been constantly been saying, what do you want? And our government has gone, we want this, we want this. No, we don't want that. No, we don't want that. No, we want this. No, we can't do this. Whoa, no. It's a complete... It's like someone who thinks they can juggle, but every time they throw a ball up in the air, it goes off somewhere else. So instead they go, oh, I'm a really good juggler. Watch, I'm a really good juggler. And they keep on grabbing balls from the barrel beneath them, attempting to juggle it, but the balls are just going all over the place. And the audience just doesn't know what to make of it. And it's just, yeah. Remember, Brexiteers constantly said, leaving the EU would be easy, we can walk away without a deal, be easy, easiest thing in the world, they said. So, yeah, Brexiteers, they're living in a complete fantasy land. A fantasy land where they're now claiming they want all these new free trade agreements where we can do all this, free trade, removing all these barriers to free trade. Yet, we are leaving the most successful and influential organisation on this planet that has these things at its core. All because they are pissed at some of the really, really light touch regulations and some of the stuff that they've had to follow. Just workers' rights is the primary one. And oh boy, we'll be getting onto that next, because the next video is going to be all about 0-hour contracts after Brexit. And oh boy, if you're in a 0-hour contract and you voted for Brexit, you are screwed.